I want to go to the front of the Financial Review and, of course, the Oz. They have the same splash tomorrow. The Fin Review battle over high income tax cuts. The federal government has not ruled out a further extension of the $7.8 billion temporary tax rebate for low and middle income earners, but says it must be wound up before the permanent Stage 3 tax cuts, which include breaks for high-income earners, begin in 2024, with Labor hardening its position against the Stage 3 cuts while simultaneously fighting the planned withdrawal of the temporary rebate known as the LMITO. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said it was never designed as a permanent feature of the tax system. So that's interesting. The other very interesting part of this, Matt, is just how strongly Labor will oppose those third tranche of the tax cuts, which of course are due to kick in 23-24, which are quite significant for anyone earning over 200K.
Well, absolutely, Gleeso. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's such a difficult time to be an opposition leader, and I know you're a betting man. I reckon the odds of an election this year have shortened significantly over the past 24 hours. I think you can see where the government's going with this one and where they're trying to wedge Labor. But, for Anthony Albanese, it's a really difficult task, and some of the other front pages are pointing to what he's going to say in his reply. But where does Labor go on this? I mean, do they say, well, we're not going to support those tax cuts and then basically put themselves offside with a huge number of voters? The other difficult thing in response to the budget, Gleeso, is that really, I mean, how does a Labor opposition oppose what is such a big spending, big government budget? I mean, it really is. It's a Labor budget in many ways. So
it is,
they're in a difficult position because they're not going to come out and say, hey, you've spent too much, you've got to rein that in. There's no way the Labor Party's ever going to do that. So, where do they attack the government? They're really between a rock and a hard place, and you can see where Josh Frydenberg's trying to wedge them on this one.
Well, Matt, it's a Labor light. Well, not even Labor light. It's a full-strength Labor budget. I mean, they've just gone to town. They're looking after the aged.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're looking after, the welfare recipients. They're looking after the tradies. They're looking after, just about every sector that's women. These are staple, bread and butter Labor people who are being very well looked after. And I've got to say, Matt, we see it here in Queensland. Queensland's $100 billion in debt, just rolls off the tongue. $1.2 trillion. You know what? I've come to the conclusion in this country, and maybe it's around the world, people don't give a rat's about debt. It's like they don't even know what it means. It's like that's on the never, never. As long as Frydenberg and Morrison can convince the Australian public that they've kept them safe from the pandemic, from COVID, and they've kept them fiscally in good shape with JobKeeper, JobSeeker and all those stimulus things, I reckon they're immoral going to the next election.
Well, absolutely, and your average punter, Gleeso, I mean, what's the difference to them between a huge number and an astronomically huge number? There's basically no difference whatsoever, and that's why the state governments have been in such a good position through this pandemic, and now the federal government's in the same position because basically you get a free pass. You can spend as much as you want, and there's basically no immediate consequences. There's no one telling you, you're spending too much. There's no one telling you you're going to have to rein in that debt. Everything's being done on a short-term basis because there's a crisis to deal with. And, this budget is just like, every player wins a prize. We've got something for you, we've got something for you. Labor says, you need to fund childcare. They pop in and say, well, here we go, we're going to do it. No worries at all. The catch, Gleeso, the catch to all this comes, and there is a story, I think, in the right-hand column of the front page of the Financial Review that talks about the catch and where it will be. And that's where they've quoted quite a few senior economists who say that the long-term consequence of this is that within a few years we're going to have to be talking about tax rises. We're going to have to start talking about spending cuts. Of course, that's of no concern to the government at the moment because it's eyeing an election possibly as early as later this year. It's only really focused on, the immediate political consequences. Someone else is going to have to deal with the economic consequences of this further down the track.
Yeah, well, Chris Richardson, very, very respected economist, says on the front of the Fin, the tax cut for higher income earners is toast. that's where the raw politics of the moment is taking us, which is quite interesting.